Hey everybody, it's Sunday evening and we're going to have a look at my office tank here for a little bit. Put a new addition in there today, but we'll get to that in a moment. I got to start all the way back here when I'm filming now because my temple plant is growing so luxuriously up and out of the water there. It looks awesome. I don't know how much taller it's going to get, but it is still gaining height. It's still putting out new growth up top. But we're also getting a lot of new growth around the sides, and I'm getting some good branching, decent internodal spacing, so I'm pretty happy with this light. It's plenty of light for this relatively low light plant, but it's so close to it, I'm not worried about it getting burned up either. So very happy with that. And today I went to, I'll let you look at the tank for a few minutes and see if you can spot the new fish. But I went to one of the PetSmarts that is a little further away from me than I normally go to. The one I normally go to is about a 20-minute drive. The one I went to today is about a half an hour away. But they often will carry different fish than my PetSmart does. And when I got down there, unfortunately, they did not have any unusual or different fish. My shark's over there chasing my new fish around, but my shark chases everybody around, so I'm not too concerned about that. I wondered about that. So if you hadn't spotted it already, I've got a Bolivian ram in this tank. You can see him in the back, and you can see the shark going after him again. So I don't know how well that's going to work out. I've been watching him all afternoon, and I haven't seen that behavior at all. But the ram was also hiding a lot because it was fairly new to the tank. And now that it's coming out about more, maybe the shark is going to be problematic with it. I don't know. I actually got 3 of them. And I've got 2 more downstairs. I think I got a male and a female downstairs. I tried to pick out a pair. And then the one that's in here, I think, is a male. It had a lot of red in its fins. So whether it's male or female, I definitely got the one that's very colorful in this tank. And then in the quarantine tank downstairs, waiting to go in my Black Ghost Knifefish tank, is one that's not so colorful and one that is likewise very colorful. Has lots of reds and yellows in its fins. So I'm hoping I got a pair for my Black Ghost Knifefish tank, and then I've got the singular male for this tank. And again, I'm hoping that I don't have too many issues with that shark. I used to have a rainbow shark and some Bolivian rams in my 55-gallon tank downstairs. It's now my T-bar tank. I had rams in there for several years. I had a pair of Bolivian rams in there, and I didn't have any issues with it. So we'll give it a few days and make sure everything's fine. Worst case scenario, there's plenty of hiding places in here for that ram to hide and stay away from that shark. I was going to say I lost him for a moment, but there it is, kind of hiding right there in the middle. So I'm really happy about that. I'm excited that that's going to be a good-looking fish. I've also got a lot more babies. Somebody in here is dropping fry all over the place, and I'm hoping they get thinned out, but you can see lots and lots of little tiny fry swimming around. Presumably it's the guppy / Endler hybrids that I have all over the place. I don't think it is any of the Rasbora hets I've gotten there, but I do have several pregnant or gravid. I don't know. I don't think the hets are egg layers. In fact, I know they're not. I've seen them laying their eggs on the bottoms of leaves before. So the hets and there, the Rasboras, sometimes they're called Harlequin Rasboras. These are not lamb chop Rasboras, despite what they look like. They will do their they'll turn upside down and they'll actually lay their eggs on the bottoms of leaves. So they're definitely egg layers. And a few of them in there are big and fat, so I'm pretty sure they are gravid. And then, of course, I've got all of these guppies and guppy Endler hybrids and whatnot, and I've got lots of males and lots of females, so there's just always a continuous string of fish in this tank, and I really probably ought to get in there and thin it out. It's getting a little ridiculous population-wise. But I also wanted to talk about quarantining our fish and the fact that I did not. And now, once again, you can see that ram just chilling out over there in the bushes. So most of the time, this is what I've been witnessing today. I've been seeing just normal behavior that you would expect to see from a ram. They're not really super active fish. They don't dart and dash and move around constantly. They're inquisitive fish. They're intelligent fish, but they don't waste a lot of energy moving around a lot. They're very much like my Crenocycla downstairs, my dwarf pike cichlid that's in my Black Ghost knifefish. Just kind of pokes around, prods around. Again, very curious fish, but not a very active fish in the sense of these sort of guppies that are just constantly moving and these Rasboras that just constantly drift back and forth. Not that kind of fish. So it should be okay once it gets settled in. As far as quarantining it goes, I do have the ones downstairs in quarantine, mainly because the tank they're going in is under construction right now. Well, it's not under construction, but I'm doing some work on it. I've got it blacked out. I'm trying to get all of the cyanobacteria out of it. I'm going to be putting an air stone and some treatment in there in a few days. And, why add fish to that mix when you're doing all that stuff? So let's get finished with that tank first. And then by then, the other fish will have been in quarantine for a few weeks, or a couple of weeks at least. And then we can worry about getting them moved into the tank. So the reason I didn't quarantine this fish is because I've got those other fish in quarantine already. I didn't want the 3 of them in there if they're going to be fighting. It's only a little 10-gallon tank. I know that's how they are in the fish store, but I was watching them chase each other around in the fish store. That's how I kind of determined who the males were, in addition to their colors. So I don't want that behavior going on for several weeks in a tank in my basement. So I separated them, and the 2 downstairs seem to be just kind of hanging out near each other like I was hoping, even though they're juveniles at this point, or at least I assume they're still juvenile. And then this one, of course, is separated and by itself. So over the years, what have I experienced that would lead me to say, you really need to quarantine your fish and all that? The only things I have ever brought home that have actually infected or contaminated my tank has been ick. I know there's other stuff out there. I've heard horror stories here and there, but again, those are anecdotal. When you think of the tens of thousands of people out there buying fish on a regular basis, how often do you hear the story about a tank being wiped out by some parasite that got brought home? Now, ick notwithstanding, ick, of course, is a parasite, and ick has wiped out many tanks. But if you pay attention, if you catch it early enough, ick is not really anything more than just a nuisance. It's very easy to treat. And again, as long as you pay attention, and I am certainly guilty of not paying attention in the past, and I have lost fish to ick, so it is something to be concerned about. I'm not dismissing it lightly. But as far as disasters, as far as bringing home some parasite that's going to infect the intestines of my fish or something like that, I've just never had that experience. I've only ever brought ick home. And so statistically speaking, it's just not that big of a concern of mine that I've brought home some strange disease that's going to somehow now get in my tank and start killing all the other fish. And when you think about the number of times that I've brought ick home compared to the number of fish I've brought home, again, statistically, it's not very likely that I brought ick home and am now contaminating my tank. So it is a risk, but it's a calculated risk. I kind of am throwing the dice a little bit, but I'm also going to pay close attention to the tank. I'm going to keep my eye on the fish. I'm certainly going to keep my eye on the new fish. If I see any signs of ick or any behavior that indicates that it's not well, then I will certainly readdress this. But in the meantime, I'm not too concerned about it. Again, the number of times I've brought fish home over the years versus the number of times they've turned out to be problematic, then, again, I'm just, odds are, then everything is going to be fine. Now, let's say, for the sake of argument, I'm wrong, and I just brought home some disaster that I just put in my tank, and all of the fish in this tank are going to die. While, again, I'm not dismissing that lightly necessarily, to a certain extent, I will dismiss it fairly lightly because it's a tank full of guppies that I could replace pretty much at no cost. I know that, You know, people tend to say, oh, the value of the fish doesn't matter and everything. And I know theoretically it doesn't, but in the real world it does. If I had a fish in here that had, you know, some $200 fish in there, I would treat it very differently than a tank that's got a bunch of guppies in there. And anybody that says they would treat them the same, I'm a little dubious as to a claim like that, because I tend to think that everybody sees it a little more realistically than that. So I will say that, you know, the chances of me having wiped out this tank are slim, but if I did just wipe out this tank, it would not be any enormous disaster. It would not be any, you know, thousands of dollars of fish. I didn't just wipe out a coral reef that I've spent years building up or anything like that. So like it or not, those are the factors that I consider when I think about quarantining. My emotional attachment to fish. If I was putting these fish into a tank like my Black Ghost Knifefish tank or my 125 that's got my Tenopoma in there, not necessarily a high dollar value fish, but I've had that fish for many years. I've got an emotional attachment to it. So that is a factor. I would weigh that factor in. Do I want to risk that fish versus do I want to risk a bunch of guppies and a few neons? You know, again, you may not like hearing that, but that's the reality of it. Those are all factors that I consider when I'm thinking about quarantining fish. If the quarantine tank was open, then this singular fish would have gone in there. But since I already put that other pair in there, then the option was putting this one in here. And so that's all of my thought process and all my reasoning behind why we did not bother to quarantine that ram back there. Get my hand back a little bit so you're not seeing my knuckles in the glare there. So again, not too worried about it, but make sure you're subscribed, and then that way you won't miss any of the updates or follow along with this. And if I do turn out to be wrong, you will certainly find out about it. I always post the good, the bad, and the indifferent here. You know, again, I'm not really trying to impress anybody or ask anybody's permission for how the way I keep fish. I'm just here to share my experiences with everybody. So if I do wind up having issues, you will get that experience too. So make sure you're subscribed and you won't miss any of it. So thanks again for watching this one. Don't forget, this one is my office tank, and then don't forget to look forward to what's going on with my Black Ghost Knifefish tank downstairs and the new additions that'll be going into that one really soon. Thanks again. I'll see you real soon in the next one.